Good day, everyone. Today is Friday, July 31st, the last day of the seventh month of 2026. 5 months left in the year. I hope you're doing well. A lot of people are on vacation this time of the year. So a lot of you will be seeing this on replay in the future, but you're all welcome. So again, today's Friday, July 31st, 2026. And this is Futures Friday. I'm Rebecca Ryan, a futurist and an economist, and we've got an action packed Futures Friday for you today. Let's take it from the top. I always start with a merci or a shout out. And this week, I want to give a shout out to Pope Leo, who, if you read my signal of the week from Monday, just a few days ago, you know that X1V, Roman numeral for 15, was my signal of the week. And it was a callback to Pope Leo the 15th, who was our first American Pope. And last month, he wrote, well, I doubt he wrote the whole thing, honestly. We'll get to that in just a second. But he published, I guess you would say, an encyclical. And an encyclical, they don't happen very often, but they are very often timed to major technical or scientific breakthroughs. And it's basically like, hey, everybody, here's where the Catholic Church stands on these issues. And the encyclical that with the Pope Leo the 14th first encyclical was the one he released last month. Again, these don't happen all the time, so it's kind of like a big deal when they come out. And it basically was about AI and humanity. And this is, boy, is it a signal? Yeah, it is a signal. I mean, it doesn't happen very often. These encyclicals don't happen very often. Um, Pope Leo certainly has come out on lots of issues that he has opinions about and he wants to lead the Catholic Church on. But this was really the first time that an institution outside of like Tristan Harris and he's out in Silicon Valley and he's the person who was behind the movie The Social Experiment about social media. And he's been rallying for ethics in websites and AI, et cetera. But besides Tristan, Pope Leo the 14th is really the first huge institutional leader who has given a clear moral directive about AI. So you can read my signal of the week. I'm not going to rehash the whole thing, but I really want to give a shout out to the Pope and funny story. So my signal group meets every week, and Charlie is the one who brought this signal forward. So thank you, Charlie, for bringing the encyclical forward. And when you look at the scale of it, because it is a monster, it is a stopper of a document. Michelle on our signals panel said, "Does the Pope have a futurist?" Because the depth of the encyclical and how far-sighted it was certainly made it seem like it. And God darn it, I looked it up and they do. The Vatican does have an office that was started, I think, clear back in the 1600s to help the church form opinions on things of major import that are going to affect a lot of their followers and humanity. So, how cool is it that the Vatican has a futurist? But that brings me to my signal of the week, and it is around this question: has AI replaced futurists? Has AI replaced futurists? I bring this up because the signal of the week that I'm going to share with my sense making panel this week is, pardon me, I just bumped my little deal here, my little selfie stick. What do you no, that's not what it's called. Tripod, my tripod. Pardon me for the jiggles. But the signal I'm going to bring and is about this tech company called Preseen. If I'm reading this right, I think they came through Y Combinator. And one of the co-founders said that the goal is to help policymakers make better policy. But like, look it up right now. Preseen, Preseen. And the way it was positioned on the Hard Fork podcast last Friday was like, are we seeing the future of AI and foresight? Like, is AI going to be a super forecaster? And that, of course, got my attention because not only is that the world that I live in, but I've been waiting to see how foresight was going to start using AI in meaningful ways. And I got to say, guys, I was a little disappointed. Um, Preseen, although it is, so it's an AI and it is winning all of these awards. Like Kelsey has evidently created tests of bots, like how good are bots at prediction markets. There are other like international bot contests to see how good your AI is versus my AI on making predictions. But the thing I'm disappointed with is, you know, the way that these questions for pre-scene are structured is it basically has to be like a yes no question with a time frame. And to me, that just misses so much of the nuance of what we have to do in foresight because certain things that are uncontrollable and in some cases unknowable will make these things more or less viable or possible in the future. So the answer to the question, has AI replaced futurists, is no at this point. And in fact, in the hard fork interview from last Friday, um, the hard fork Casey and oh my God, I'm forgetting the name. One of you was shouting it at the your phone right now. The guy from the New York Times, Kevin and Casey are the hosts, and they asked the pre-scene co-founder, like, well, aren't hedge funds just going to use this to like make a whole bunch of money? And he's like, well, they actually are our early adopters, but we're really hoping that governments use it to make better policy decisions. But that's not the way the technology, the questioning in step one is created. Um, there's no possibility to ask a question like, if we pass policy X about early childcare, what percentage of our state's youth would be positively impacted? You can't ask an open-ended question like that. You can only ask a yes no question. So unfortunately at this time, AI is not replacing futurists. And in fact, Preseen uses futurists' predictions to determine which futurists are most right most often, or which predictors are most right most often. And then it takes our predictions and jams them into an algorithm with a whole bunch of other stuff to come up with their predictions. So right now, pre-scene feels a little disappointing when I compare it to what we try to do when we're helping the public sector come up with better policies or become, helping communities become great places to live and work for future generations. So, all right, now let me get to the mailbag section. This is not a question, and I got to be honest, you guys, like I struggle with this because you guys don't send me questions on the regular. We just don't have a big enough audience for it right now. But so what I do for the mailbag section is I often reach into questions that I have been asked recently or that were super juicy and I think a lot of you will enjoy. So the call to action is, if you have a question that you would like me to read during mailbag, drop it in the comments here or, shoot me an email or put a note on Substack and I'll get it. Okay, but so here's the mailbag question. How do I deal with all these data center haters? Real question. Some of you know that you have called me asking me about this very question. How do I deal with all the data center haters? Um, Here's what I have to say. Like growth in some of your communities or decline in some of your communities, data centers are here. They are not going to go away. So the question isn't, do we need to throw up a moratorium? The question is, how do we deal with this in a very wise way? And I want to invert this question just a little bit because the truth is, what data centers need are infrastructure, and primarily it's energy and water. Energy and water, right? And in the United States, at least, by any fair reading of the facts, I think we can all agree that we need a different conversation about energy and water. The fact that Americans don't reuse gray water, that, I mean, we could be doing so much better with how we manage and use water. Similarly with energy. There are things that we've been able to do for a long time that most of us don't do, like time of use metering, right? Or demand response metering. These things are possible. They've been available for a very long time. And we just haven't done them because we don't have the will or, they're not foisted upon us or whatnot. So the data center opportunity, I believe, is a huge opportunity to be able to say to the hyperscalers, the data center tech companies, the tech companies that need these data centers, to say, what are you going to come and offer us? How can we think about more efficient use of energy? How can we think about gray water reuse and water recycling in a way that is going to make sense? Like, these are investments, these are things that responsible, wise communities that value their children and their grandchildren should be thinking about anyway. But now the entrance of these hyperscalers, data center companies, actually creates an opportunity for us to have that conversation in a meaningful way. And in the coming months, I'm going to be sharing stories. I have to check what's publicly available, but I'll be sharing stories about American communities who have done exactly this, who have managed to renovate and upgrade their entire water system, for example, as a part of a negotiation with a data center company. Like, if you can give us this, we're going to work with you on giving you this other thing. So one of the ways to deal with well, I mean, in some ways, there's no way to deal with a data center hater, because if they're going to hate you, they're going to hate you. You can't change other people's behavior. You can only change your behavior. But I think for those of us who see that this is a future that is on the horizon, it is here, the question becomes, all right, how do we take a step back and negotiate this in a way where there are many wins for current and future generations? And the use of energy and water are two of those that are huge infrastructure projects that will require a lot of money. These companies have a lot of money, and we could really be doing a mitzvah for future generations. So, how to deal with center haters? Get your poop in a group. Figure out what your negotiation chips are and what you really want to accomplish for current and future generations from, like, an infrastructure perspective or other perspectives, and go to the negotiation table with that in mind. Okay, so the next part of Futures Friday is, what is this futurist working on? Like, what are the things on my desk? Well, in addition to this data center hater question, I'm also working on the future of PFAS and forever chemicals, and I'm working on the future of aging infrastructure. So that does include some of the water infrastructure that we just mentioned. But aging infrastructure is not very sexy to talk about. And yet, if you look at the the civil engineering report that America gets every year or every other year, we are falling out of C territory into D territory. So our bridges, our roads, our, all the stuff that's under the ground that we can't see, this stuff, thankfully, were long bets that our grandparents and great grandparents made. We have benefited from it, but now it is time to upgrade some of this infrastructure, which, yes, it will be expensive. And also, it can be transformative, because you know as well as I do, if you were still watching the television that you had from 1950s, you are missing a lot. And the advances in infrastructure has come a long way. And there are a lot of things that today's roads, bridges, sewer systems can do that those built in ye olden times just cannot. So it's another opportunity. So again, future of PFAS and forever chemicals and future of aging infrastructure. And I'm looking at all of those topics in partnership with my friends at CDM Smith, who are doing a three-part webinar series called Next is Now, on these three topics: data centers, aging infrastructure, and PFAS and forever chemicals. And if you are a planner, if you are a civil engineer, if you are a person who cares about this stuff, these webinars are free to attend. They are loaded with SMEs from CDM Smith who are doing all kinds of amazing work around the world. They're bringing case studies, they're bringing client projects, and I'm bringing a little bit of futurist perspective. So look up the CDM Smith Next is Now 2026 webinar series and plan to tune in. All right. So this week's try this at home. I'm 54 now, and I'm really feeling my age. I'm really starting to feel my age in all the ways, in like how quickly my body can recover from things like the break of my wrist that I had a couple months ago, to like even like I don't get the technology as quickly as I once did. And so I used to be that person who understood how all the technology worked and could do it with one hand tied behind my back, and I'm not as up on it as I used to be. So One of the things that I'm thinking about a lot these days is how I can continue to think in multi-generational cycles, because eventually I'm going to turn into worm food and I'm just going to be pushing up flowers, right? We all are. But that doesn't mean that my passion and commitment for the next generation is any less. So I have been thinking about this a lot. And I'm shaking right now this moss ball terrarium. And these moss balls here, I've actually named mine. I don't know why I named them this, but the little one is Rita and the big one is David. And my job is to shake the terrarium once a day and clean the water once every week or 2 weeks. But these moss balls will live 200 years. And I'm going to encourage you to put something where you can see it, touch it, experience it every single day that you really interact with, that reminds you of the legacy you want to create, or that reminds you that there will be a 200-year future. So, what are those things for you? It could be spending a couple minutes in front of the digital frame that your kids and grandkids, load their pictures onto to just remind you of the people you love who will be here after you leave. You might want to buy a moss ball terrarium like this one. I bought this one because I heard Catherine Ann Edwards from Optimist Economy talk about hers. I was like, oh my God, I need one of those. I need a little totem like that. But what is the thing that you can interact with every day to remind you that time is deep, our time is small, and that we have a responsibility for what comes after us? All right. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next Friday.